All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is Tuesday, which means there is junior high football, and the D-backs, 7th grade A team, are tied with Lomax 6-6. There's a rushing touchdown on the board from Charles Gooden III. So he's doing his thing out there. Anyway, so all love to all the D-backs and all the teams that are playing today, all our junior highs. Okay. I call this meeting of the Pearland Independent School District Board of Trustees to order on September 10th at 5:01 p.m. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that the notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Let the record show that all trustees are present: Carbone, Murphy, Decker, Gooden, Botkin, Floyd, and Barry. And I am told that we do not have any speakers signed up for public comment, so we will go directly into closed session. And I'll read all that. Wait a second. Okay, the Board of Trustees of the Pearland Independent School District will now convene into a closed meeting to discuss the following items posted on our agenda this evening as allowed by Title V, Chapter 551, Texas Government Code, and/or the Education Code. The superintendent will present for the board's consideration or discussion of the following matters: Section 551, 071, 072, 074, 076, and 082. No voting will take place in closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussions in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in open meeting. It is now 5:02 p.m. The board will adjourn into closed session. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier, it's Tuesday, so the D-backs are playing. 7th grade A D-backs won 19-6. There were 2 rushing touchdowns put on the board by Charles Gooden III. So we're having a real good night. So let's, all right. Real good night.
Talk about our kids in sports.
Come on, talk to me, man. I'm sorry. I'm just
I
like,
don't
hey.
know my update. My daughter played volleyball. I don't know where she is. I wasn't there, so I don't know.
All right. 6:20 p.m., the board will reconvene from executive session. No voting or no action was taking place in closed session. Is there a motion?
Yes, sir. I move we accept and approve the superintendent's recommendation for employment of personnel as presented.
That's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Motion second. Second Carbone. Excuse me. Motion Decker, second Carbone. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. All right. We will go into opening remarks by Trustee Botkin.
I do the flag first. All right, please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. To the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Please remain standing as I'll say a quick prayer for everybody. Lord, as we come in here today, please bless each and every one of us and our whole district and our children. We go through some interesting times in our society. Let's not forget the fact that we are here for our children, our staff, and our community. Always keep in mind that we always should see the good things in people and always try and live in your word and what you tell us and you want us to live, and try and find the good in everything everyone does. Bless this district, bless these children, bless this community, and God bless Texas. Amen. Have a seat. I did want to say that off to a good start of the school year. Correct. Dr. Kelly said we had a great report. I think Charles worked extremely hard to get onto every single campus
Every
this
campus,
year. Yes,
yeah.
you did. Did a great job. And so I want to commend the staff, the custodial staff, the cafeteria staff, the maintenance staff. I would be remiss for Mr. Berger getting everything ready. Everybody involved, the ESC, the principals, and teachers, and even the students, and the parents trying to get their kids back on a routine, because being a father of 4 and 3 in the district, it's a little tough to get them back in a little routine, waking them up early in the mornings or, it's a little different. They stay, those teenagers their brains don't shut off till about 11 o'clock, 11:30. So when they got to wake up early, it's a little tough on them. But commend everybody for the start of a good school year. It's going off good. We got some good preliminary numbers on our enrollment, which is good. It shows that we're doing a lot of good things in this district, but we're not done, and we're going to always try and improve. But I want to thank everybody for appreciate y'all. I want to give everybody a round of applause, especially over there. See some principals over there. We got a lot of sports going on, a lot of extracurricular activities. I always marvel at when I drive by the high schools and see the bands out in the parking lot. And and so I always, and as a former football player, and I always go, gosh, they worked a lot harder than I ever did, because they're out there on that concrete, and so it takes a lot of effort to get out there. And thankful that kids are involved in something, right, bigger than themselves, and that's what it's all about. Academics is great, but when you can always be a part of something that's bigger than yourself, you learn a valuable lesson in life. So thank you to everybody for the extracurricular activities, and I'm happy and excited for this school year to start. I mean, keep going, moving forward, and getting better. So.
All right. Thank you, sir. Okay, we will roll right into board recognition. Let's go.
Good evening. Pearland ISD is home to some of the most talented students and staff in the state of Texas, and now comes the time we love to recognize them for achievements and along with our generosity of our community partners this evening. Each year, our administration selects a student as the featured artist for our district employee birthday card. The 1920 artist is Jamison Middle School's Carly Tunstall, who is now a 7th grader at Pearland Junior High South. Carly's Jamison art teacher was Miss Greta LaFleur, and they are here with us this evening, so come on up. Congratulations. And for Carly, we have a set of her cards that she can use for other people's birthdays, and then we have a framed picture of her card. Congratulations. Next, we'd like to continue with our Fine Arts Department. The Pearland ISD Fine Arts Department recently received the Texas Art Education District of Distinction Award. This accolade recognizes the district's commitment to providing a well-rounded education that advocates and integrates visual arts curriculum to inspire creativity and reach all different types of learners. For the 2019 award, more than 1,000 school districts were eligible to apply. Only 20 were selected and met the high standard and will receive the outstanding honor, indicating that they are in the top 2% of districts in the state. Here with us this evening, representing the Fine Arts Department, is Director Tom Bell and Coordinator Victor Rigoza. Charles. There you go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Charles, step in a little bit. There you go. Each year, the Vic Coppinger Family YMCA hosts one of the largest area school supply drives, Operation Backpack. Through the 14th annual YMCA Operation Backpack, Vic Coppinger Family YMCA donated over 1,000 backpacks and 8,000 school supplies to Pearline ISD students who needed a little extra help to start the school year. We're extremely grateful for the continued support of this community partner and this monumental undertaking every year. I've seen the mountain of school supplies. It's huge. At this time, we'd like to recognize YMCA representatives and board members with us here this evening. We have Director Suzanne Murray, Kaylin Collins, and Christina Gutierrez, and board members Adam Martinez and Lexi Marshall. Squeeze in there. There we go. Charles, you might have to get on the side over there. There you go, right there. Perfect. 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 Next, we'd like to recognize several community organizations who came together to provide the district with donations and training for Stop the Bleed. Thank you to Memorial Hermann Pearland, UTMB Health, Texas EMSC State Partnership, and Children's Memorial for their efforts. Together, they were able to provide Pearland ISD with enough basic North American rescue individual bleeding control kits to place at every campus in the district with the AED. This is an estimated donation of over $3,000 in supplies. Here representing Memorial Hermann Pearland and Children's Memorial, we have Memorial Hermann Pearland Trauma Program Manager, Meg Michael, AVP Nursing Memorial Hermann Pearland, Louise Hernandez, and Director of Local and Community Relations, Ashley Quinones. Our pleasure. Children's Memorial? Yes, yes. You give them to Ashley. Ashley will give them all. There we go. Can you get that to them, Ashley? Or? Got it? Thank you so much. Good job, guys. Finally, this August, the district held a leadership retreat for district principals, directors, and assistant superintendents, which included inspiring speakers as well as growth, fellowship, and team building opportunities for everyone in attendance. This leadership retreat would not have been possible without the support of our title sponsor, Purdue Brandon Attorneys at Law. Here tonight, representing Purdue Brandon, is Mike Darlow. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it. That concludes our recognition this evening. Thank you.
All right, just a quick programming note. We're going to move the presentation on the accountability up to the regular agenda, and it's going to be the second item we're going to do under regular agenda. All right, so for now, we're going to briefly have a board member committee update, and basically what we wanted to do here is just kind of give an idea of some of the things that are going on in the district that the board is involved in. Mr. Berry, would you like to give a preview of the Student Advisory Committee?
Yeah, so Student Advisory Committee, we came up with the Student Advisory Committee last year. We were able to have one meeting of that committee, and that meeting actually entailed the junior highs and high schools, primarily the class presidents and whatnot. It was a canvassing of those campuses with the principals, and Nan Weimer, I believe, is the one that spearheaded that for us from administration. Did a great job setting that up, and it was a great meeting. We talked about various different things about campus culture and things along those lines. I think next time when we have our one upcoming here soon, the next month or so, we're going to focus on those individuals as overachievers, but we're also going to try and get individuals that are kind of middle of the road, because we're trying to understand exactly how to make our campuses a little bit more accommodating, and how to break through to the middle of the road and maybe even some of the ones on the lower end of the achieving scale, so that we can build that culture of excellence within the school district. I think it's important that we all agree, and I think we all agree on that it's very important for the success of all these kids too. So,
Thank you, sir. All right, there is also a required now Safety and Security Committee, which met on August 28th, and it will have regular meetings as required by the state. We had a really good conversation, a great cross-section of the first responders and district staff that were there, talking about facility hardening, mental health, and prevention, lots of different things. So it's really impressive the amount of work that's gone in on safety and security in this district. We will also be having the long-range facilities planning committee. We're going to have a subset of that committee begin to meet. I think they may have 2 meetings over the next couple months, and they're going to be giving us recommendations on naming facilities in the future, right? And hopefully, of course, this is all about, we wanted to figure out how we could honor Preston Bullard. And so the committee is kind of the way we're going to get some input from the community on that. All right, and we also, as Dr. Kelly announced a while back, we have as a diversity committee, which has been renamed the Culturally Responsive Committee, right? And they're going to be putting on some meetings, and they've already had some initial kind of organization type things going on, but there's going to be a lot to come from them. They're going to be doing a lot of community engagement as well. All right, we'll move on from there. Good deal. Anything else? Did I miss anything?
Coming up this month, middle of the month, is TASB Fall Conference, which is Texas Association of School Boards.
Right.
We go meet as a school board. Several of us are going. We just get up to date on what's going on in our state and across the nation, and we earn hours to become better school board members for our district. So just go. We actually take class 2, guys, just in case y'all don't know that.
Yeah.
Jeff or Sean, can you update us on NBCEA? I saw something online about the grand opening of like culinary or something that
Oh, yeah.
NBCEA is sponsoring. Would you talk a little bit about that so we are all on the
Yeah.
same page?
So if you haven't had an opportunity to go to Turner and look at the new culinary facility, I actually went around there. They have actually 3 commercial kitchens. They have a humidity temperature controlled baking facility in there. It's absolutely top of the line, incredible opportunity for our kids to learn the art of culinary. But on top of that, we also have state of the art HVAC program, lab, and a welding lab. And these kids are actually before they actually start welding with sticks and things of that sort, they're actually using AR, virtual reality, VR, I guess, virtual reality goggles to figure out how to start welding and whatnot. It's incredible. So it's come out great. I think it's going to be a great learning experience for the kids. They're going to, I can't say enough about it. It's just incredible.
Do you have the date of the grand opening of the culinary?
No, I don't. It's coming up here on October 3rd, I believe. Is it October 3rd?
October 3rd, Alan?
The 3rd.
The third, okay. All right.
Yeah.
And then the Pearland ISD Livestock Show is this week as
Yeah.
well, right?
That's right.
In fact, there's a special event on Wednesday. Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about that for a minute, Kim?
So, Dr. Nixon can also, we have a student who, a senior FFA student who, as part of his Eagle Scout project, decided he wanted to give back and partner with some special needs students with disabilities so that they could experience FFA. So I believe we have 4 students who are going to be showing animals tomorrow. It's 4 of our special program students. At 5:30, there's going to be, I found out today from Mr. Cole, barbecue sandwiches and everything. So we have a lot of people come out. It'll be about an hour and a half. And the kids have been practicing and doing a great job. So we're super excited.
Hey, Charles, if I can add one more thing since we're still kind of on the Turner thing.
Go ahead.
Back to the NBCEA, the October 3rd event is our equipment fundraiser. It's one of our only fundraisers of the year where we put our equipment on display. We go out and we reach out to all the CTE teachers, find out what additional equipment they need in the classroom. We actually go and purchase that equipment through NBCEA funds, and then we auction those items off. So as a stakeholder, my company's a stakeholder, and so are some of these others here on the board and in this room. Part of our stakeholder funds go towards equipment funding and scholarships for the individuals seeking dual credit programs at Turner as well. So October 3rd is an opportunity to buy some or bid on some of the equipment. You don't have to pay for the whole thing, even if you just want to contribute $100 towards one piece of equipment. It's gratefully appreciated. Thanks.
Is that at 6 or 6:30? Do you know?
It's 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
All right. Thank you all very much. As you can see, there's a lot going on, and we didn't even really scratch the surface. So thank you, guys. Let's move on to the consent agenda. There are 2 items presented. Is there anything any trustee would like to remove for consideration? Hearing none, is there a motion for the consent agenda?
I make a motion that the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion
Second.
Decker, second Barry. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. All right, on to the regular agenda. Item 1, consider to approve the guaranteed maximum price amendment to the contract with Stewart Builders for services related to the rig scope of Pearland High School 2016 bond project and 2 additional rig-related projects. Thank you, Mr. Posh. All right.
Thank you. So this is the GMP for the remainder of the rig projects. So it's really 3 things: the expanded press box, the facade treatment, and the sound system. We were able to get the graphic banners, the wraps on the front and on both sides. We did that as an alternate. We are able to get that in the price, and we're still under budget, so
Outstanding.
we're ready to go.
Outstanding. All right, I'll make a remark. I was on the visitor side of the rig, and those lights are nice and bright, man. Beautiful. And I've been talking about lights for years, but
Great.
that
Okay,
stuff
good.
was great. Anyway, okay. You did. You were right. You're absolutely right. Okay.
You won't hear that. No.
Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Well, I just want to say to PBK and John, everyone involved so far, really appreciate all that hard work. I know it was long. I know we went back and forth on a lot of different things, but really appreciate what you've done.
One other sidelight, since we were talking about the lights, Mr. Berger did a lot of helping us in the temporary lights this last year when they were real dark. So appreciation to him as well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
His team.
All right. Is there a motion?
I make a motion that the board approve the guaranteed maximum price amendment to the contract with Stewart Builders for a sum not to exceed $7,615,233 for services related to Phase 2 of the rig, and authorize the superintendent or his designee to execute the amendment and any other necessary documents on behalf of the school district.
Second.
All right, motion Decker, second Bakken. Is there any further discussion?
I just want to note that I'll be voting no tonight. I've been opposed to the expanded press box since the very beginning, and the fact that this is lumped together tonight, I just want to clarify my vote before votes go out tonight.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right, any other discussion? All right, let's vote. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries 5-2. All right,
They-
with Carbone and Barry voting no. Okay. Now, as noted, we will take the overview of the accountability system results. We'll get that going. Yes, ma'am. All right.
Hello.
Hello.
Good to see you. Well, once again, I feel like I have the best job in the world because I get to come and give you all of our wonderful results. I'm going to let my guys in the back get the PowerPoint up for us. So looking at the A through F accountability system and our second year in this system and our students' outcome, and you'll notice probably when you looked at our presentation tonight, I carried over our theme from Convocation of Grit, Growth, and Greatness, because I really thought that was a wonderful reflection of where we were. Huh? I do have a flash drive. It's this one right here.
Well, yeah, but it's just a shortcut. It didn't copy it.
Oh, okay.
That's the problem. Sorry.
All right, thank you, Tim, getting us squared away.
Technology.
Live and die by it. Live and die by it.
So how about those D-backs, huh? How about those Cowboys? How about those Saints?
Oh my goodness.
How about those LSU Tigers?
I don't want to
How
talk about
those
that, man.
Astros?
Hold on.
Oh, my.
It was a tough weekend for Tech. I mean, the D-backs were the first team of mine that won this whole week. Yeah, it's been rough.
All right.
Okay, thank you,
here
Ms.
we
Akers.
go. All right. So looking at a couple of milestones and some wonderful recognition that our district has gotten. Once again, we received an A+ overall grade by Niche. We were ranked #1 as best school district in Brazoria County and #4 in the Houston Metro for excellence in academics and student culture. Looking at, so various school districts are ranked in a lot of categories, but we came out number 25 as best school districts in the entire state of Texas, and number 34 in diversity. So I think that's very important because we do have an incredibly diverse student population. In the TexasSmartSchools.org, this is really an indicator of academic progress over per pupil spending, and I think I'm sure Dr. Kelly wishes that red dot was a little over to the left, but it really speaks to what we do in our district. This is where they use both academic progress and spending levels
Ellen,
to
let
give
me-
you a SMART score.
Let me edit that a little bit. The best place to be on that chart is in the upper right hand because the bottom scale starts with a higher amount per student and moves to a lower amount. So basically what it's showing is that we are at the top of academic progress and near the bottom of academic spending. So, yeah, I guess that's what you mean, is you'd like to see us spending more.
We'd like to
get-
have a little more money
Yeah.
to spend from the state, absolutely. But the 5-star rating that we received reflects the strongest relative progress combined with the lowest relative spending. So doing a great job there. And looking at our financial summary, looking at how our district did receive what we did compared to others, our fiscal peer was at, we were at 8,256 versus other district average, which was 10,385. So our overall rating was a 98 out of 100 for an A rating for our financial integrity rating for the system of Texas. For our overall TEA rating, again, in our second year of this new accountability system, the old accountability system had a separate state and a separate federal accountability component. This new accountability system looks at 3 domains. Domain 1 and 2 are our state accountability, and domain 3 is our federal accountability. And so it's combined. And so we had 16 of our 23 campuses maintaining an A rating or improving scores. So if you remember last year, our schools didn't actually receive a letter grade. They got a MET standard or needs improvement. But we did get a numerical grade, and they sent out in January a what-if report telling us what our letter grade would have been. The district received an actual score of 93, which was almost identical to our score of 94 last year. However, it was reduced to an overall rating of 89 and a B due to one of those things in the Domain 3 federal accountability that we'll talk about in just a moment. And that score adjustment was due to a new rule, a new piece of legislation that said that if any campus in the district received a rating of D or below, that the district overall would have to have its rating reduced to a B. So even though our numerical rating was a 93, our posted rating was a B or an 89. What I think is really notable is that our 3 comprehensive high schools all received an A. And I think what I noticed the most as I was looking at our STAR data and I was going through all of the various data was that you can see as children come to us in elementary school, they come from a variety of backgrounds, different achievement gaps, different gaps in their knowledge. And then as they come in, as you look at our data, as they move into middle school and junior high and then high school, you really see that achievement gap narrowing. You can see that in our data. It's very evident. And I think that makes me the most proud because that's our job as educators, is to make sure that we are continually narrowing that achievement gap. And then you see it when we get to high school, and we're at A ratings for all of those high schools. So I think that we're doing a great job. And as you said in the beginning, we really have to applaud our teachers and everybody that's involved in that process that gets our kids to where they need to be. Looking at growth, again, as Dr. Kelly has said, and I agree wholeheartedly, I think the strength of this accountability system is that it looks at student growth. What I think is really nice about this accountability system is that, you know, even if a student did not pass a STAR test last year, and they didn't pass this year, but they made growth, they made a year's worth of growth, then the district still receives points for that. And as an educator, to me, that's what's most important. Is a child growing? Because if a child comes into the district, say, moves here from a different state or another country, and maybe they're not quite at the level where we would want them to be in Texas, we may have even bigger gaps to fill. But if we're filling those gaps and we're moving children forward, then this accountability system rewards us for that. And that is part of that 93 that we received. So we continue to navigate the complexity of the system, but what I think is most important is that this system really connects accountability to instruction, and I think that's a big strength in that system. So as we talked about a minute ago, last year campuses did not get a letter rating, but this year both the district and the campuses did receive a letter rating. Nothing changed in terms of how they're rated. If you remember, there are 3 domains. The first domain is straight STAR scores. For elementary, middle, and junior highs, it's 100% STAR scores. For high schools, it's STAR scores, college and career readiness, and graduation rates. And then domain 2 is that growth, that student growth. So they look at your STAR scores and they look at how your students grew, and they pick whichever one you scored the highest in. So again, another strength of this system is they look at where you did the best. And then 30% of the system is based on the federal piece, the ESSA accountability, which is in closing the gaps. So looking at domain 1, student achievement, our district received 93 out of 100. Student achievement, again, is STAR scores, and that looks at what students know and are able to do at the end of the year. So again, overall, we received an 89. Our rating was reduced to an 89 or a B rating overall. But I want to look at and show you and give you some information on some of our grade level STAR results, because they were quite spectacular. And I want to tell you some areas where our children really grew. With the STAR test, we have 4 achievement levels. So that is did not meet, approaches, meets, and masters. So there's 3 cut scores within that. Just so you know, there were 8,302 campuses across the state of Texas rated in accountability ratings this year, so that was over 1,000 school districts. So looking at third grade math, as you can see across the board in every category, we continue to outperform the state. But I want to give you some even more detailed information. So for grade 3 math, our students gained 3% in approaches, 6% in meets, and 6% in masters. So in that meets and masters category, talking about that growth and wanting students to continue to grow, we're continuing to improve those achievement levels. And again, thinking about where they come in kindergarten and the various differences they have when they come to us, being able to close those gaps starting at 3rd grade is really significant. In 3rd grade reading, our students improved 0.2% in approaches, 4% in meets, and 6% in masters. So really continuing to grow there. 4th grade math, up 0.5% in meets and 3% in masters. 4th grade reading, up 3% in meets, and 4th grade writing, up 2% in approaches. So not only did we have across the board increases, but we had some very significant increases within those grade levels as well.
Yeah, what I like about that this year, and you may have noticed I didn't really report on this in past years, is that the system has finally become stable in that you can actually compare last year to this year because the standards haven't changed. And so now we have a real way of saying, did we improve over last year?
Absolutely, absolutely. And the nice thing is this system is supposed to stay stable for 5 years, so we really should be able to have some nice comparisons.
Dr. Kelly, when they measure those students, are they following the same classes when they measure the gap? Are you saying that in 3rd grade in 2018, they were at 88%. Now in 2019, they're at 91%. But is it a different class that came behind them that you're measuring?
No, it's cohorts moving along. So 3rd grade is our first measurement. 3rd grade is their first STAR test.
So then you look at 4th
And
grade
so
the
then
next
we look
year.
at 4th grade. So the first year that the district has a growth measurement is in 4th grade. We don't have a growth because third grade is our very first test score. So 4th grade is the first year you have a growth measurement.
But when
So
we talk-
yes, then
when
they
we-
follow that throughout.
When we talk about growth in the number of students who are exceeding expectations, though,
That is correct.
That
Growth
would be
and
different.
scores.
Okay.
Growth and scores.
right? So that's one 3rd grade group compared to the following 3rd grade group, right? Or is it the same group of kids?
It's the same group of kids.
Okay.
So then I wanted to give you just a comparison of some surrounding districts, and I think that this might denote just a little clarification as well. It's not really an apples-to-apples comparison. I think that Dr. Kelly and I would agree that all of these districts are high-performing districts, and I think that, you know, not every district has the same high rigorous standards that we do. So we try to look for other districts that we feel like are also high-performing. But there are still some differences there, just to give you an idea. I put some numbers down. For example, in 3rd and 4th grade, we had about 1,500 testers, 1,565 testers. But Fort Bend had 5,000 testers. Friendswood had 400 testers. So you're looking at, it's a big difference in 400 versus 1,600 versus 5,000. So a lot of difference there. And really with all of the high-performing districts, when you get to a certain level, even just moving the needle a little bit, is significant. And you kind of see, as I was looking at last year versus this year, we may have lost a point, they gained a point, we gained a point, they lost a point. So it just shifts. But I think it is important to see that we're in the ballpark and that we're doing well. And I think that we consistently outperform some of the other high-performing districts as well.
Yeah, I think I inserted this about 2 or 3 years ago in order to compare to the best districts in the Houston area. And as Ellen just finished saying, it's not totally a fair comparison. Although Clear Creek is almost identical percentage of economically disadvantaged students, Fort Bend has more than we do. Friendswood has considerably less. They're about 10%. Katy is, I think, 2 or 3 points above ours in economically disadvantaged. And Tomball is only about 20% as compared to us.
Right.
We're like 29, I think we've crossed over into 30.
31, I think, was the last thing I saw.
So it's not completely apples to apples, but it gives an idea of how we do compared to the more prominent districts. In the
Right. Tomball actually has almost the exact same number of students that we do, but Creek has a more comparable economically disadvantaged population and culturally diverse population as we do. But it's just to give you an eyeball of what's going on. Looking at middle school, again, we had some really tremendous scores here in comparison with the state. And we had some great gains here, too, that I really want to share with you. In 5th grade math, that master's level, we increased by 7%. So that would have been 4th grade last year, 5th grade this year. That highest achieving level, we increased by 7%. 5th grade reading, the highest master's level, we increased by 4%. Wait till you hear this one. 5th grade science, the meets level increased by 13%. The master's level increased by 17%. So really tremendous gains there. 6th grade math up by 1%, and then 6th grade reading up by about 0.5%. So just continuing not only to achieve at a high level, but continuing to move that needle forward with the kids and really helping the students achieve at high levels. Again, just looking at regional comparisons, I think we continue to hold our own, and everyone pretty much in a comparable range there. Then looking at junior high, we again had some really good numbers here, and this is where, as I was looking at the data, I could see just that achievement gap really becoming more narrow. Our students performing exceptionally well. In 7th grade math, we were up about 0.3%. 7th grade reading, approaches, meets, and masters, we increased in all of those levels, up 3% in meets and masters. 7th grade writing, and writing is one of those areas where students continue to struggle. At the master's level, we were up 5.8%. So really great work there on behalf of our teachers. And then in 8th grade, we had increases in approaches, meets, and masters in all 4 subject areas. So, in math, up 3, 6, and 8% in masters, and reading, up 8% in meets and 4% in masters. Science, approaches, meets, and masters were all up, and then social studies, approaches up 5%, meets up 4%, and masters up 2%. So really just tremendous work going on.
So what I noticed looking at the graphs, and maybe this is, this is the way I'm understanding what you're saying, is that the blue lines tend to decrease in their percentage rates, where ours are continuing to hike as we progress through like elementary, middle school, junior high. We're seeing continued gains in our district as the state sees continued declines.
I don't know that the state is seeing declines as much as they are remaining flat. I think across the board, the state might be only increasing a percentage or remaining flat, whereas we continue to see growth, even at the high, and as you get higher, once you have students, when you have 88, 89, 90+% of your population at a passing rate, and then at a rate at master's level, achieving beyond what is, so that is working above grade level.
Right.
And when you see students continue to move above that mark, that's pretty remarkable when everyone else at the state is, and when the state is remaining flat, that means that students are at approaches grade level. So a lot of those students across the state aren't even quite making meets grade level yet. So our students are at meets and higher, moving even past master's grade level. All right, and then looking regionally, 7th grade math, 7th grade reading and writing. And then again, here's a regional view for 8th grade scores as well. And then our high school end of course assessments, which are a requirement for graduation. We did see some nice gains in English 1 and 2. That continues to be one of the more difficult exams for students to pass, and so we did move into the 80 percentile for that, and so we were very excited about that. Really great gains in algebra and biology and U.S. history. And then looking regionally at how we compare with our surrounding districts. So just looking overall, this is just a screenshot from one of my reports. Total, we administered over 36,000 tests in our district, and then you can see the number of tests and the percentages of students who were at the approaches, at the meets, and at the master's grade level. Keeping in mind, if they were at meets, they were also at approaches. If they were at masters, they were also at meets and approaches.
You know, one thing that I'd like to add there that we're concerned about, all school districts in Texas are, is that look at that total number of tests, 36,389. Within, 2 or 3 years, we have to do our testing online. So that basically means computer access for every kid for all those different tests. And a lot of school districts, including ours, are not yet ready for that.
Is there a waiver on that?
Well, they're getting tighter and tighter every year, so I don't know, Ellen, if you know.
Not at this time when, so the last meeting I had with TEA and with the Testing Assessment Department and TEA, their response to that question was, we've let you know the deadline, 2022. Our expectation is that you will be prepared. So, and it's interesting because the current legislation states that they want to minimize the educational disruption. And so they're shortening the assessments, and that's like a whole nother presentation I can give you at another time, but they're shortening the time of the assessments. They're eliminating some of the writing assessments and things coming up in the future. A lot happened in this last legislative session, going online. But in order to go online, they're really going to have to open up that window a lot longer because every school district is certainly not one-to-one. And so, in my opinion, it's probably going to create a greater disruption to instruction. But as always, we'll come up with a plan and we'll figure it out. Okay, so progress domain, this is that domain too, where we talk about student growth. And in that domain, we received a score of 91 out of 100. And just very quickly, this was some information that I had just shared with Dr. Kelly. And I wanted to bring it and share it with you tonight too, because I think it's so remarkable. In looking at our STAR scores for reading, just to give you an idea, we gave 9,539 reading tests in the district. And of those tests, over 7,000 showed growth for our students. And then in math, we administered 8,899 tests, and right at 7,000 of those showed growth. So tremendous amount of growth in our district. And really, I think that domain two and that growth piece, where your district grows is, where growth is where your district goes.
You know,
So
you may have heard me say this during convocation, but one of the features of the new accountability system that I appreciate is, in the old days, you either passed or you didn't pass. And so you got credit for the kid passing, and that's it. In the new accountability system, if you make, as Ellen suggests, a year's worth of growth, you get credit. And you get credit for the kids that move from did not pass to approaches. From approaches, you get credit to those who make it to meets grade level. And for those, again, neglected in the past system, those who are at passed, meets grade level and move to master's get credit. So you're looking at every kid now becomes part of your accountability system as opposed to did they pass or not.
And for us in Pearland, where we do have so many students who are high performing, for students who are already at a master's grade level, who then achieve master's next year, maintaining that growth, because even staying at master's from, say, third grade reading to fourth grade reading, you have to have a year's worth of growth in order to do that. So maintaining that level also demonstrates growth. And is rewarded in the current accountability system. So in the old accountability system, a lot of times districts and schools were focused just on getting those kids to pass. And now it really forces and requires, and is a great thing, has, you know, it rewards schools for taking care of all of their kids, which we have always done. But across the state has really created a focus that every child matters and every child counts. And I love that. And it's nice for districts like us that really have so many high-performing students to be able to be rewarded for that. Domain 3, closing the gaps. So some really interesting things about this domain. This is that federal domain that we talked about, the ESSA required domain. So they came out with 6 labels in this domain this year. And you only get a label if you didn't meet a target in this domain. So they basically did not make a label that said you did good. So the absence of or silence of a label means that you did well. But what I found really interesting, and I just learned this, in the state of Texas, almost half of the schools received an ESSA label. And of those schools, there were 70 A campuses, A-rated campuses in the state of Texas that got a federal label. Remember, labels aren't good. Over 1,062 B campuses got a label. So Dr. Kelly and I will both agree this is the strongest, best accountability system we've ever had. But it is not without its flaws. I think the commissioner has been very receptive in listening to these things, and one of the organizations I'm very active in, TSNAP, Texas State Network of Assessment Professionals, we have voiced a lot of these concerns to TEA and to the commissioner, and I think they're listening. Another flaw, if you will, in Domain 3, the 10-year goal for the graduation rate for the state of Texas is 94%. Well, in Pearland, we're at 99.5%. The current system says if we don't grow 0.1% every year, we don't get any points. We're graduating almost every student that comes through our district. It's almost impossible to grow 0.1%, and we're so far beyond the 10-year goal of the state. Yet we're going to be penalized and not receive any points, and that's in this Domain 3 portion, not in Domain 1, the state accountability. So there are a couple of challenges that we'll continue to work through as we go. Now, another issue here is when students in 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade can take a Spanish STAR test if they're learning the language, and then they transition over to an English test, which in my opinion you really should get almost double points for, because the student has not only acquired a language but also learned content. But when they transition from a Spanish to an English test, we don't get any growth points that year. So a couple of challenges within that Domain 3.
So you mentioned the labels, but I don't see anywhere that explains what labels that we might have received as a district. Did we receive labels?
We had 3 campuses that received labels.
Okay.
We had 2 elementary and our alternative school that
Okay.
received additional targeted support.
And the other category that we didn't really talk about was a special education category. So in the past, we could have students with extreme needs take different kinds of testing, but my understanding with this new measure is that we're kind of expecting every student to try the regular STAR without alternative modifications.
That is a
Where are we
great
seeing
question.
there?
Yes, so we do have the STAR Alt test, which is the test for our most severely impaired children, but we are capped at 1% on that. So once we meet that 1%, and that's typically, it's for the district, we look at it campus by campus, and We try to make the best decision for each child on each campus. But as a result, many students who previously did take an alternative assessment beginning last year had to take the regular STAR test. And I think we talked about this a little bit last year, and Dr. Nixon can certainly chime in as well. You know, our philosophy and our direction for the campuses on that was, we're going to prepare the children, we're going to present the test, and at the point that they cannot engage with it, we're going to say that's okay. And we're not going to make it an emotionally stressful situation for that child. So yeah, we did, us and every district in Texas, I mean, everyone took a bit of a hit on that.
Do you remember what the percentage of Star Alt was prior to that change? That we were, what population percentage?
I don't, I could look that up and get that information.
I'm just
for you.
curious because I think that
Dr. Nixon, come on up.
About 2%
Okay.
that had taken it before they changed the eligibility requirements. And so with the eligibility requirements for Star Alt, the biggest change for us was that if students had functional skills, so they could move about the building, they could get lunch on their own, those qualities in a student made them now ineligible for that alternate assessment. So it took us from just a little bit over 2% to that, trying to reduce it to 1. People still made decisions in our meetings based on what was best for kids.
Sure.
You know, not the percent. Now, Ellen and I might have to do a lot of paperwork in the end, but ultimately, it was always about what the students needed.
So I guess the point that I'm trying to make is, number one, we're seeing growth in our student population across the board, even with students who may not have functional capacity to really attend to the tasks at hand on a regular STAR. So that, and we're seeing some growth changes even with those students, which is huge. And I guess, secondly, I think about the computer access piece and those students who barely have functional ability to attend to a paper STAR are really going to struggle. And I don't know that there's any answer to that. I guess I just wonder out loud, like, how that's going to impact us.
Well,
I
and
think
Dr.
there'll be
Nixon,
some exceptions. I think they'll still offer, I think we'll be able to.
As
I'm sure it'll require a lot
modifications.
of paperwork on our part.
Sure.
Well, in STAR alternate, that 1%, that's given by the teacher. So the
Right.
teacher, it's a very kind of elaborate process.
Sure.
but the teacher's able to directly enter that. So the students will still see a paper pencil type task.
Right.
But at those that the other 1% that would have qualified for STAR Alt in the past, but
I'm
now
sure there will still be
some modification,
accommodations
Yeah.
that
We hope.
hopefully
now,
will-
Lisa, I don't want to, and Ellen, I don't want to overstate this case, but one of the good things about moving to online is there's apparently online helps of different kinds available to those kids, not available to others.
right.
And so that may provide some benefit.
There are, I think, Ellen and I are huge proponents
We
of
are.
online testing.
Yeah.
There's a lot for our special education students, not just the text to speech, but they have
The bubble overs and all.
additional language supports where there may be a word, and for some cases, if it doesn't have any impact on the question, there'll be a picture. Or they'll take wording, especially as it gets to the high school level courses, it'll have simplified wording, so that the students have an opportunity to show what they know about U.S. history, not their deficit in reading. And so there are huge advantages for probably the greatest percentage of any at-risk population, whether there are EL students, special ed, students in an intervention, online versus.
And those are given regardless of the need?
No, they have to
No, they
meet the
have-
They have to
eligibility
meet the,
criteria.
okay.
Right. And I think, talking about online, and I think this is true, I think we both agree, we believe this. I think our biggest barrier to online testing is really more adults than it is students. Our students are quite comfortable and confident
Right.
with technology and being online. And the online testing platform, I can tell you my daughter would prefer it. She would much rather take a test online. And I think students are pretty comfortable with it. We will have to, integrate some opportunities for them to interact with that platform and access to it. But the state does have interim assessments, which are now available, which we can start using. And so lots of opportunities. We're really going to work hard to provide that for our online special ed testers this year. And the nice thing about those interim assessments is they provide all of the accommodations.
So they can
everything
get
that's
practice with
available
them
on
in
the actual
advance.
STAR test. It's on that STAR platform, and they can engage and work with it, and they can take it up to 20 times, like multiple times.
Okay.
So we're really going to work together with resource teachers and give kids opportunities to engage with that this year. And so we'll be ready. We'll have a plan, and we'll be ready. Our
Well, I'm just excited to hear that even with those kind of dings, that all districts across the state saw, but that we didn't see a significant impact in our overall results based on those challenges that were coming our way. So I think that's actually really
And with our
exciting.
increase in our special ed population.
Yes.
Dr. Nixon, you want to talk about that? But I mean, we've continued to have an increase in our special ed, and Dr. Franco can talk about our increase in our LEP population. So we really have, we've had a lot of challenges and a lot of changes in our demographics. And if you look at our demographics over the last 10 years, a lot of changes. But that's why I said, when you look at growth and greatness, I mean, what our staff, what our teachers, what everyone is doing to meet those challenges is absolutely amazing. You know, that we're at a 94, we're still at a 93.
It
It's
really
really
would be
remarkable.
interesting to see an overlay graph of that data combined. Because I think that tells a much different story than what's portrayed of our district, of being a high economic, that we just have kids naturally groomed to be successful on this achievement test, is a very different story than the reality of what we see in our district.
Yes, it is.
Of the increase in special education population, the LEP population. If we could overlay that somehow, it would tell a significant story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, we do have that one graph, I think I've showed that to you, where I just showed the difference between somebody put that together for me, between 2009 and now, the change in demographics. And the most dramatic change is really in the last year or two, and particularly in special ed and LEP populations. We basically have the same size student body, or very close to it, but a dramatic shift in the percentage of special ed and English language learners.
But that visual combined with the scores and success rate is, in my mind, the visualization that I'm seeing is pretty exciting, given the work that, and tells us a significant story of the work we're doing in our district.
How many special ed kids do we have in the district?
Well, when I looked today, we had about 2,755.
That's over
Not that
10%.
you're counting.
No, so is
So
the
we're
Over 10%.
getting close to probably 10, 11%.
is the increase in that number? I'm sure it's due to a couple of different factors, but is it easier now to qualify for special ed,
I would
or is
say-
it that people are coming
I
to our
would say
community?
no. With
Okay.
as much litigation as there is in the special ed world, we spend a lot of time training our LSSPs, DIAGs, speech paths, that every single evaluation needs to be able to stand up in court. So,
Right.
in other words, as much as we love these kids and we want to help them, if, for example, they're a slow learner, they're not going to qualify for special ed. You know, we still want to help and support them, but making them special ed is not the answer.
Right.
So, I don't think that they're necessarily being easier. We work really hard with intervention, so that if that, intervention's not working, we've got a path. Part of it, I work a lot with Texas Children's Hospital and some of our kind of most challenging students. They recommend Pearland. They'll
Yep.
say, take your kid to Katy or Pearland. And so we get some pretty significant students that we're, honored to be able to serve. It just takes a lot of resources. But last year, I would say the ratio was 3-to-1. For every one special ed student that left our district, 3 more came in. It's hard to tell yet what it
Right.
looks like this year, but that's our year last year.
And did you have any increases in your staff, Dr. Nixon?
Ellen.
I'm gonna open up a
Careful.
whole can of worms.
Yeah.
I didn't say that.
Unsolicited.
I love this.
Yeah, I mean, if you had a board meeting, why not just let it
Yeah,
rip,
throw
right?
it in. I love it.
I'm gonna take all the attention off
Mr.
of
Moody
it.
had
Okay,
a
you're
dinner
done.
to
No,
Moving on.
We do. We have so many, our demographics have changed so much, and these two ladies right here, they're my coworkers, and I just have to tell you, the amount of, the work they do with the staff, the amount of students they serve, with a few people is remarkable. It's unbelievable, and they are amazing to work with, so.
So that's I mean, to me, that's a shocking number, 12.5% of our student population.
Yeah, we're closer to about 11.
Yeah.
So 2755.
And
2755 divided by 21,600 is
But
12 and a
we do
half.
private
Why is that
schools. So
shocking?
we serve
Oh, wow.
private school students, speech, in our district.
Higher
So
than national averages.
We've got those, and we've got what we call our ECI.
Not surprising, bro.
So there's some that aren't
Doesn't surprise me.
sitting in our counts that we serve.
And what is the percentage of population that's EL?
Autumn, the kids get lost, or the kids in the middle, because they got programs.
So we have about 10%
So we have 10% in ESL, right?
And it could be that some are
12%.
combined, the dual efforts.
Okay, there's overlap there.
There's
okay.
some overlap, but that's
Yes, students are nonverbal.
right.
When we go to administer that, they're not able to.
Right.
Right.
In the past, they would be at the NQ did not qualify for services. If they were nonverbal, life skills, anything, the minute that we assess them, they're gonna automatically have the grade.
But you're talking about 20% of our population that meets one of these categories.
That's a lot.
It is a lot.
exactly right.
Considering that our assessment scores are moving upwards of 85 to 90% in most achievement areas.
With a 30% economically disadvantaged population on top of that.
And a lot of those kids, at least on our end,
Right.
qualify under the different.
Right.
Okay. All right, thank you, ladies. It really is a pleasure to work with everyone. Finally, I'll wrap it up because I know you have other business to attend to tonight. Designations, distinction designations, we received 67 overall, which again, I think is incredible. 10 of our 11 elementary campuses received distinctions, all 4 middle schools. Alexander and Sablatura, the maximum you can receive at middle school is 6, and both received 6 out of 6. All 4 of our junior highs received distinctions. Barry Miller received all 7 that they could possibly receive. Pearland South got 6 out of 7, and I know Mr. Freaking and his staff were very excited about that because they have an incredibly diverse population at their school. So they have done some tremendous work there. And Dawson received 5 out of 7, and Turner received 4 out of 7. So a lot of great distinctions there. Just to give you an idea, we have tremendous supports in place. Again, we really focus a lot of that support at the elementary level with those students coming in kindergarten and moving up through those levels, trying to fill in those gaps and get those students at the same level. So they'll be on a level playing field. Leveled literacy intervention is a small group reading support. Title I small groups reading is at our Title I campuses. Reading recovery is for our students who, coming out of kindergarten, going into first grade, have shown that they're not at grade level reading. So we target those students and have a specific program for them. We have coaching and literacy math courses for our teachers. First and second grade Do the Math is a particular program, again, for those first and second graders who are not performing at grade level expectations in first and second grade. So we really try to focus on getting those students at the youngest age possible into at that grade level performance. We have push-in small group support at almost every campus that we have. Campus-based purposeful planning led by our wonderful curriculum and instruction department. I can tell you that a big part of what my department does involves data-driven instruction. We have common assessments, we have district benchmarks, and my department pulls that data and feeds that out to the campuses with the curriculum specialist so that we can really make instructional decisions based on how students are performing throughout the year. We look at student by student, teak by teak, and we really look at what we need to do for each individual student. It is a student by student decision, and that is why our district is so successful. We don't have programs, we don't look at groups of students, we look student by student. And then we have some wonderful community support programs where community members come in and give children that additional text support they need through reading programs. And
Ellen,
so
I really appreciate the focus you've given to so much academic support, but I think looking holistically at every child is something that our district is also excelling in, because what you see academically is also a strength of us supporting their social emotional needs. Because the district, the population that's coming to us, when you have an EL student, a student with special needs that is struggling to learn commensurate to their peers, those that are economically disadvantaged are coming to us with a whole different set of challenges that makes the hurdles for them to climb that much steeper to perform here. So I know you're talking a lot about the academic supports, which are a huge accolade for our district. And I applaud our district for seeing the whole child and then giving those supports social emotionally as well.
That really comes to from that one-to-one. When we talk about looking at child by child, and that's where the teachers really look student by student, and we have all of these additional support programs to identify where student needs are and really put those proper interventions in place for every single student based on their needs. So you're right, it really is that nice holistic picture. We have a lot of people, as you can tell, involved in all of that.
Thank you for all of your efforts in those
Oh,
directions.
absolutely. Thank you for your support.
Yeah. Can we go back to those support slides? And
Of
you mentioned that
course,
we had 3 campuses that got labels, and we were talking about their label for additional support. Is there any additional, I guess, federal funding? I know I see the Title I, but is there any additional funding that comes in from either state or federal to provide these services?
Unfortunately, there is not.
Okay. All right. So my next question is, for those campuses, what additional appropriations are in order from this board to support what's going on at those campuses?
We have some very focused support going on, myself personally, and from curriculum and instruction. Dawn Lissy, Bonnie Scheit, and our curriculum specialist, we have some very targeted and focused meetings weekly with with those campus administrators, with the reading teams, with the math teams. We're doing some coaching cycles, going in and working particularly with new teachers, first and second year teachers, making sure that they understand the curriculum, helping model lessons and support in the classroom, making sure that we're looking at every student and readjusting funds where necessary to put in these supports at those campuses. But they really are receiving a weekly focus.
Okay. And I mean, it's not a gotcha at all, because
No, of
I know
course
those
not.
campuses, and I love them, and we're behind that. Those campus leaders.
Absolutely.
And so I just wanted to make sure that we weren't falling short of
No,
what we should be doing.
absolutely not. And I think you'll find, I mean, historically, the campuses with the highest percentage of economically disadvantaged students always struggle the most. And, not an excuse, just an opportunity for us to look at our resources and see what we need to do to provide additional support to those campuses.
To use a military analogy, we don't have the extra resources as if to go out and just pile on new resources as much as deploying things as strategically as possible. And so you see the campuses that are struggling, just like she just described, more of our existing resources are going to go in that direction to help those folks.
Right, and I would like to point out that one of the campuses that received an additional targeted support label is a B-rated campus that has grown substantially every single year. There was the campus is doing everything right and has grown in every single category. So it fell in that category of the other 1,062 campuses in the state with a B rating that got a federal label. So a challenge of that system, but we'll work with it.
Yeah, and that's lawn, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much as always, and thank you for all of your
Thank
support
you.
and everything
Yes,
you
ma'am.
provide
Thank
for
you.
us.
Thank you very much. All right, members, are we good to keep going, or does anybody need a brief break? All right, let's keep rolling. We will go to item 2 on the regular agenda, which is the public hearing on the proposed tax rate.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board. First of all, I don't know in what order we want to do this, but there should be an opportunity for anybody that might be here to comment on the particular proposed tax rate.
Allow me, Mrs. Carter, would you be comfortable with doing what we did with the budget, and I'll open the public hearing and have you just talk about what we're going on and then giving a comment? Okay, all right, good deal. At 7:33, we will open a public hearing on the proposed tax rate 2019-2020 for the Pearland Independent School District. All right, Mrs. Carter, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Okay. With me is Mr. John Roebuck. He's our financial advisor. And so the tax rate that we are presenting for approval, if you recall when we were preparing the budget, which was early during the HB3 implementation, we had knowledge of what to do with our M&O rate, which is at 97 cents. So we're proposing a 97-cent M&O rate. And with the INS, we had initially proposed about a 3.5-cent increase. Actually, it was like more like 1.5-cent increase. And after looking at several scenarios, we have determined that it's in the best interest of the district to go for a full 5 cent. And based on what we promised the voters back in 2016 when we did the bond election, that we were going to be potentially going up 7 cents. By going 5 cents this year, we'll be able to keep those 5 cents for the remaining term of those bonds.
And those 5 cents you're talking about are on the INS. Obviously, you
Yes.
said that's 97 cents. Okay, so, all right. Is there any member of the public who wanted to make a comment on the proposed tax rate? Okay, seeing no one interested in speaking, we will close the public hearing at 7:35, and we will go into the consideration of the action item, which is the approval of the tax rate. Let's see.
So in the recommendation, it mentioned something about in using the appropriate language as prescribed. Is that the appropriate terminology, or should we go to the actual verbiage that's further back?
I don't think it matters, Jeff. The reason I think I came up with that particular first part of that a couple years ago, because sometimes the language in the actual tax notice does not reconcile with reality, where they'll make it sound like your taxes are going up when actually they're going down. And so I just left that there. But whether you need to say that or not, I think the main point is that you're passing the resolution that's in your packet for the tax rate.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion. And using the appropriate language as prescribed by the property tax code to approve the resolution levying an annual ad valorem tax, I move that the property tax rate be increased by adoption of the tax rate of 1.3956, which is effectively a 0.88% increase in the tax rate.
All right, motion Barry, is there a second?
Second.
Second Carbone. Any further discussion?
I just have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
On page 35 at the bottom square, it says fiscal year amendment required, yes, and the amendment for debt service will be presented in the board in October. What does that mean? That's the first time I've ever seen that.
So since the tax rate, as compared to what we adopted it, the INS tax rate will be a little bit higher, I will have to bring an amendment to increase the revenues.
Okay, so once we approve this new tax rate, we'll be incurring additional revenue, and
Yes.
so that will change the budget that we approved in June.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Georgiana, can I ask one more question? Can we go back to slide 34, just one, where the text, under the total appraised value, the new total appraised value of property was about $12 million more than last year, but yet the taxable value of that new property is about $1.5 million less. Do we know why that is?
I'm sorry, where are you looking?
So in the middle of the page under section 26.04. So the second line shows the
Right.
total appraised value that the
Pretty likely
county.
because of the frozen values.
Like 65 and over?
Yeah.
But typically those values are frozen. This is a new property. Typically those values are frozen when they at the rate that they buy it at, or at the rate they get into it.
You see where he's looking, Georgiani? Total taxable value of new property, it moved from 145 million in the middle there to 143.
143?
Yeah.
Oh, that's the preceding tax year, so that's.
Correct. So the increase on, if you look at the second line, total appraise of new property, the increase was about 12 million from last year, but the actual taxable value is about $1 million less than last year.
My guess is, and it still certifies these values, I'm sure, but number one, and number two, it could be also, if the property started, it may not be inhabited, completely finished.
Right.
So the appraised value will be here, but the taxable value, what they're paying taxes on, is a lot lower. Because it's not completed yet. Like
The reason
property.
we're guessing a little bit, Sean, is that
Okay.
this notice
And
is
I-
made
you don't see this a lot.
for us.
Huh?
One thing I can think of.
Well, but if unimproved property, and I'll just stop here, but if unimproved property is in the middle of development, I mean, they value it. You know, if they take raw land and they've put in streets, whatever valuation they've given it that year, that's what they're going to get taxed upon.
Right.
So, not to say that that doesn't make sense, but I just,
It's the only thing I can think of. I've seen it. That's the only thing I can think of. But yeah, it is a big difference. You're exactly right. I'm not sure exactly why that is. One thing I can think of.
I'll have to ask the tax assessor
Yeah,
collector.
the appraisal district
There we
fills
go.
this
I'm sorry.
form out for us,
There
and
we go.
so we're relying on their.
Okay. All right, so with the INS,
Over. Okay.
with the INS 3.5 cents higher than what we were looking at the budget, during the budget process, the point of that is we're going to be able to make additional payment. We're going to be making additional payments on debt, or how does that, what does that work?
But by increasing it by the 7 or 5 cents.
Right.
All this is doing is we're taking the 7 cents we told taxpayers,
Mhm.
and we're dropping it 2 cents to 5 cents because we're doing the tax rate increase now
Now instead of over
over the next 3 years.
3 years, okay.
So you're saying if we did it over the next 3 years, we would eventually need to get to the 7 cents?
6 cents.
6.
So
Yeah.
additional penny. And we'll also not have to spend down our fund balance as much.
So we'll have a healthier fund balance by increasing it to the 5 cents now.
And we'll be able to maintain that and keep consistent for the next foreseeable future. There's a potential refunding next year about this time. We'll come to you, offer to you to do. It'll save about $1.5 million a year. They'll be able to keep the tax rate at 5 cents going forward.
Well, that's an important piece to think about. Okay, so it's not just the approval of the 5 cents now, it's the potential for the additional funds, because we're doing this 5 cents now, to be able to leverage that funds against moving the rate higher later.
Exactly.
And of course, there's a lot of more variables like property value growth, and so on.
There's been a lot of changes this year, obviously, in this legislative session. Last year with Hurricane Harvey, really, by switching to swaps. You also have actually lost state funding. I mean, this year will be the first year you don't receive state funding, IFA and DDA, because your values have grown, but your student enrollment has not. So your wealth per student has gone up. So this is an opportunity to get your tax rate up to where you pay off the debt and not change it going forward.
And the taxpayer's not gonna feel the the increase as much because of the compression rate that the state
Right.
created.
Overall, it's a net 2-cent decrease to the taxpayers.
All right,
Rock
anything
and roll.
further? There was a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? Motion carries 6-0 with trustee Decker absent. Thank you all very much.
John, we all decided to make you wait after that presentation about, that's why we moved you way to the bottom of the agenda.
We appreciate y'all's
That you could appreciate
patience.
the
Thank you very
academic
much.
growth of our district.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Carter.
I appreciate this.
All right. That is item 2. Item 3. We'll move on to
Board operating procedures.
board operating procedures. So that would be
Page 39.
39.
yes, sir.
There we go. Okay. So, second reading, annual review and update of the board operating procedures, and that is made up of the rules of conduct and the standing rules. All right, Dr. Kelly, you want me to lead this one, or
Either
you want
way,
to?
There were two possibly unresolved issues from the last month. One of them was Michael had made a particular suggestion for addition to, as it turns out, item 11 under the rules of conduct regarding that vendor voting thing. And then the second one was there seemed to be a little bit of a unresolved over social media policy. And so for that particular one, I got some information from TASB, which I inserted as a link. So I guess take it from there,
Okay.
Charles.
All right. This is a little bit more. Yes, sir.
No,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead. Well, I was just going to give just a little bit more background. I think Jeff wasn't with us when we talked about
Lance
this.
had left.
And Lance had
when
left.
We were
Okay.
talking about
Right. So, man, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead.
You were going to go over the
No, I was gonna, okay, Mike has some language, and, all right, we got to a point where we talked about the rules of conduct, and, Mike had a proposed, language talking about not being able to vote on something that you receive campaign contributions, from a person related to, all right? And then the second thing we talked about was the proposed resolution, and we talked about what is an acceptable use for board members as far as just social media in general, and then use of logos, I think was a particular thing. And so we actually approved the standing rules. Those have an approval date of August 2019. But we held this item because of these two things, and because, Jeff, we wanted you to have a chance to weigh in, and now we've lost Rebecca. But, Mike, if you wouldn't mind going ahead and taking us through your language.
Yes. So, Jeff, a little bit of background. Last month, I had met with some people from other political organizations, entities in Texas, and one of the common things that I heard was that at a point, whenever in their time as an organization, there eventually became conflicts where people were having campaign contributions from potential bidders or vendors, and then voting, giving their potential client or whomever contracts with their entity. And we see it all the time in local politics, and one of the things that I thought would be really good if we put that in here, it's not necessarily legally binding because it is totally and entirely legal to take those contributions from organizations or individuals and then vote for them, unfortunately with the TEC, the Texas Ethics Commission. However, I think that because most of our rules of conduct are not necessarily binding either, that this would be a good step forward for the district, just to put it in now so that in the future it's just understood.
And this verbiage here in the quotes are what we're voting on?
Yes. Yes, and so I mentioned in the email to Dr. Kelly that if there's a quibble with any specific word, I'd be more than happy to talk about it.
Well, I don't like the idea of this whole vested individual, and that's very arbitrary.
In what way is that arbitrary?
What do you mean, vested individual? That
Vested
could mean
individual.
that could be a vested individual associated with any organization
That has business before the district. So if somebody's like in a position
who's a
of-
vested individual?
A vested individual is someone who's necessarily vested in a company. So if
How
somebody
so?
is
Are they financially vested from a 401k perspective, which
sure,
means that
absolutely.
they potentially have? Well, so then I disagree with that whole premise.
If somebody is a vested individual with a company and they're giving you campaign contributions, then at that point in time, you have to recuse yourself from that vote on that
So
specific
let me just give you an example. At one point in time, Hewlett Packard had more than 20,000 employees in the city of Houston, at which point many of them were vested in their 401ks for the company. They can be deemed vested individuals. So I would have to recuse myself from taking contributions from any and all those individuals if we wanted to buy any HP systems for the district.
No.
That's,
A vested individual.
You could take the contribution, but you couldn't vote on the.
yeah,
the
see, that's
contract.
not right.
So let me
That has-
take.
that, I think, that's, I'm sorry for interrupting, but
Yeah.
I just don't think that has no place in what it is we do and the way that we conduct business on a daily basis here.
Let me stick my neck out there for a second. And so the point of the language, I believe, is to avoid. Mike just gave you that was a good explanation. I don't think we talked about that last week, but I mean the point is we're trying to avoid conflicts of interest.
Right.
Right. Okay. So let's take a step back and look at what the purchasing process is in Pearland ISD. None of us are involved in the purchasing process.
Right.
So when a recommendation gets here from purchasing, it's gone through a process that none of us were involved in. So all of the recommendations are quote unquote clean, right? So if we go to the rest of the rules of conduct, what I'd be more concerned about is trustees trying to improperly influence that process. And there are two other things in the rules of conduct that prevent us from doing that. We're not supposed to talk to vendors or bidders. We're not supposed to try to influence staff to make any
Hiring or
any
purchasing
decision
decisions.
on anything like that, right? So I think the language is there and the process is there because there are some organizations that when when purchasing gives them a recommendation, they give them like, well, here are our top three, right, and you guys pick, right? And at that point, it's like, well, now you've got, people can start making decisions on who they'd rather vote for because they gave me $100 or whatever. But we kind of we're out of that situation, so we're just voting on a
District recommendation.
right on purchasing recommendation. That notwithstanding, I don't have a problem at all with some language in there, but I think what Jeff is saying is that vested individual, that needs a definition, right? And political support directly or indirectly, I think that needs a definition. So I'm gonna further stick my neck out there, and I wrote some other language that I'd like to distribute for everybody to take a look at. So I'm gonna take one, pass it
Guess,
down.
Can
Yeah.
we add to that conversation a little bit? Number 14 or 15 on the current rules of conduct says that board members shall not place themselves in a position that may present a conflict of interest. So I feel like it's duplicate effort and
Yep.
already covered.
For sure.
I mean, isn't that?
Well, one of the things I
Isn't that
hear
already
all the
there?
time when I'm out in the community is that there's serious concern from people who maybe not know the board member rules of conduct, who think that there's wheeling and dealing because they see it in other government entities. So another mention that we talked about last time was that this is for transparency, so that everybody knows that this is explicitly in there.
I don't need somebody to explicitly put wording in. You ever hear the phrase, like he talked himself into it? I'm just using he as a general term.
Yeah.
That's what this is doing. So the more verbiage we add to support what's already there allows for more ambiguity versus clarity.
And you just
And-
stated yourself that the community at large is not normally aware of the rules of conduct.
Right.
And so just adding language to something they're already unaware of doesn't clear up the
Clear it up,
mud
yeah.
any.
I mean, if you're going to be bound by what people are looking at or not, but this is more of an agreement between us. I mean, we're talking.
But if the agreement
reason
between
that
us,
this
then
came
the
forward
words
to the
are
board.
already there. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. The reason that this agenda item is on the board, aside from the I think annual review, is because people were upset over use of a header, right, a graphic, which I was doing, in my official capacity as a school board member, presenting an official policy, proposal, or resolution, right? So that being said, that wasn't against anything in the code of conduct.
Well, you violated the order of operations when you
There's
did that.
absolutely not. There's no indicated
Well, wait.
order
I
of
think if we go,
operations.
I think
Never
let me
presented
interrupt.
to the board
Let me
to
interrupt.
begin with.
It
Let
was
me interrupt.
It was not.
Let me interrupt.
Not at the time you posted it on
Mr.
Facebook.
Berry,
It
if
was
you
actually,
would
sir.
allow me to
It
interrupt.
was not.
I have the facts.
Michael, if I could go
haven't
back
seen
to
it.
what you said.
Well, you don't look at your information.
Gentlemen, if I could go back to what you said about the whole reason this was on the agenda was because of, I'm sorry, when you said
Outside
that.
of the annual.
Yeah, okay, outside of the annual review. Okay, so, but we have an annual review, and so are you saying that you brought the language up because of?
No. Excuse
I
me.
just got a little
Yeah,
confused.
no, for sure. Number two, the item number 2 on this proposal is specifically in reference to some people listening to other people in the community about some resolution issue, which is, straw man's argument. But that being said, that's why I put number 1 in here, was to further, if we're going to do these rules, I'm going to look at them.
That's why. Oh, okay.
And add
Okay.
information in here that
Okay.
might be good for future
Okay.
boards.
Okay, and Mr. Berry, I have to follow up on the what you mentioned about violating the order of operations or whatnot. There was absolutely nothing wrong with what Michael did as far as any written policy, right? He had every right to put out what he put out, and there was nothing wrong with it. People can agree or disagree, but he was well within his rights, and I feel like I have to say that's not even really what we're talking about right now. So we're talking about, yeah, I know, but we're talking about, let's narrow the focus. We're talking about adding a provision to the rules of conduct about campaign contributions and voting on potential contracts, right? Let's narrow that focus. So let me read what I wrote, and again, take it for what you will. All right. My proposed language was members will recuse themselves from all discussions and votes related to any company seeking to do business with Pearland ISD. If the member has received campaign contributions as defined in Title 15 of the Texas Election Code from any employee of the company, any individual under contract to the company, or any political action committee associated with the company. And the reason I wrote this like this was to give the board something to look at that I think gave clear definitions for who we're talking about, right? And then, of course, it's up to the board to decide which way we go with it. But I guess let's just take a read of the room of what we're
I'm just going to say that I think we have enough standing board operating procedures to protect us against. And I'll question, why hasn't it been changed in the past? I mean, this is looked at every year by many boards, and I haven't seen, too many of them change it, to get too specific. So, if we want the public to know what we're doing, be transparent, let's put the article out there and let them figure it out, and let's not confuse them. Let's just, we have standing rules, and let's educate the public. We have standing rules that already protect us as board members, so I'm against changing any of it.
Okay.
Charles, I did have one thought. Your argument earlier, I didn't think about, but it's very important, and that is that the process for purchasing basically requires that the board make a yes/no vote on the superintendent's recommendations. So, there is no way to influence who we recommend to you other than to vote no if you don't like the person that's being recommended.
Or you could question the process.
Or you can question during the middle of the vote.
No, you could.
Yeah, and I
there's
think
a couple things, but
I think Georgiani and I would
hard.
both say
It's hard.
I do not ever recall a board member since the time I've been here say, choose this vendor.
That's
I have a
right.
relationship
And that's why I
with them.
think that this even bringing this up is absurd. It makes absolutely no sense, and it's unfounded for anything that's ever come before before Pearland ISD. I've not seen it, nor have I heard it. And trust me, if anybody in this room could get political contributions from a corporation, I could do it. I mean, we just don't need it.
I think what I have seen that, in honesty to the board over the last 8 years, has been if somebody has a relationship and they think it's pertinent, they bring it up and say, look, I'm going to recuse myself from this vote, or I want to disclose that I work for communities in schools, or whatever it might be. I have seen that. So I'm not arguing for or against it, but I hadn't thought of Charles' explanation, which is true. The purchasing comes down to a yes/no vote from the board.
And so obviously we're having a conversation here not about what's legal, but what's a higher standard, right, of what we considered ethical, or what could be considered ethical. And I'll also point out that we do have policies we have a policy on ethics and a policy on conflicts of interest. And again, those policies reference state law, and there's a bar to be met for when the state says you have a conflict of interest, which is depending on how much income you're going to get from something or whatever. However, there's places where a person would have to file a conflict disclosure and recuse themselves. So there are a lot of things in place, right? But what we're talking about is, do we take a look at this higher standard and say that we just think it's unsightly to vote on things because of campaign contributions, and I guess that's the question before the board. So.
Well, look, I'm obviously on the losing side of this debate tonight, and that's okay. I think it's disingenuous, willfully, and naive, in the nicest of words, to say that this is not necessary, especially as you're all politicians. We're all politicians here. This is what a lot of governments do. They say that this doesn't happen, and then, of course, it does happen. That being said, Mr. President, I agree with your words here. I like them. I think that they would be a good thing for the district to have. However, I'm not accusing anybody up here of doing this stuff. I made that very clear last time. and I'll restate that as well. But I do not trust most politicians. Just
Good thing I'm not a politician.
well, by definition, you all are, and we all are, and we all have
I'm not.
political campaign accounts. We are defined by state as politicians. That's my 2 cents.
Not
Okay,
getting paid
let's,
for
let's
it.
just set that to the side and let's move on to the social media guidelines. Let's say we have not made a
I
decision.
want to
on
say
that.
for the record, though, Charles, before we move on,
Yes, sir.
that the comments Mr. Floyd just made are slanderous to every single one of us on this board. And I take
Well,
you cannot put me in a category of being deceitful, which is what
I
you
did
just
not say
did.
that. No, sir.
You implied that.
I specifically did not do that.
Go ahead, Jay, leave it on, Jay.
Okay, let's move on to anything regarding, and again, I wrote anything regarding the social media guidelines.
Hold on, Mr. President, are we gonna do anything? Are we gonna take a vote on that, or are we gonna?
No, we're going to set that aside, and we'll just because we think we got 3 things to look at here, and then we'll come back and look and see
Thank
what we're going to actually vote on to approve. So, social media guidelines, and Dr. Kelly sent out with the agenda a document published by TASB, Texas Association of School Boards, for social media guidelines for school board members, and that's something that came up in the last meeting, and just as for your consideration, again, this is another addition to the rules of conduct. And the simple language that I have written here is that members shall abide by the most current version of social media guidelines for school board members published by the Texas Association of School Boards. And I wrote these 2 things, these last 2 pieces of paper here, and if you guys want a copy? No, just so you can see what we're looking at. Anyway, I wrote these 2 things just kind of to frame the discussion because I didn't want to just go, all out. But these last 2 things I don't think are necessary because I'm not a fan of writing policies for something that, was just something that happened one time, right? It's, I just don't think is an elegant solution. So there's that piece, and then we talked about making sure that if a trustee puts something out that is that own trustee's product or proposed whatever to be considered, that we have a policy not a policy, but we have something in the rules of conduct about, I guess, proper use of images, and then the way to disclose that this piece of literature, whatever it is, belongs to a single trustee and not the board of the district. So for your consideration, those last 2 things, are they on the page? And if there's any interest in discussing any of that, then.
So what you're saying is adopt what TASB has on all their bullet points of.
Right, my
bullet points in addition to the bottom one?
Right.
Well, again,
That would be a sign. We would sign this particular portion as long as the other standing board. Like,
I'm not sure I understand what you mean.
so when we sign our beginning
Right.
of the year, right? You're just gonna state your name. in this
Oh, no,
section?
okay, what this says is that if you put out a document, right, your document has to have a disclosure on it that says, this is mine, right? And that would
Gotcha.
be, okay? And every time something is produced, you have to put that on it.
I see
Right?
what you're saying.
Again, I don't think we need to go into that, but that's just where the discussion went, so I just wanted to have something to frame the discussion, so.
Charles, I'd like to comment on both of these. I think both of these are helpful to the administration. The first one, social media, that is not confined to any one trustee nor to any particular year. There are always concerns about social media postings and whether they're perceived by the public to be official or not official. So I think your solution is very elegant, just basically saying, keep in mind these guidelines put out by TASB, which is a very trusted source. And and the second one too, yeah, I think that where Michael tried to do this with what he put on his resolution, he was basically trying to put this thing at the bottom. And,
Right.
but I think yours is even clearer and says,
Yeah.
you know, this is not official.
Itself.
Well, the language was proposed.
Right, yeah,
Proposed. So
yeah,
if you read it,
yeah. So,
So I think that it's pertinent to consider the social media guidelines because as we progress in a world with social media and computers, we haven't really, I don't think boards prior to us have been as engaged in that world as we are with the members sitting here on the board and future members for that matter as well. So I think that guidelines for that are helpful because there's nothing referenced currently in the current rules of conduct which references social media code of conduct. I think that the last part, in my opinion, is it's similar to the extra comments about campaign contributions. The data is already referenced in the code of conduct about not speaking on behalf of the board and remembering that you're a solo person, you're not the board itself. And so I feel like it'd be a duplication of effort there. But those things are already covered both in the rules of conduct and the guideline presented by TASB. So if I had to give my opinion, that's what it would be.
Agreed.
Saying, keep 18.
I'm saying
Social media.
include the social media guidelines and do away with the rest that's suggested on the paper that Charles provided for us.
Well, I'm saying, if I'm looking at the paper, you're saying, he's got about numbers, right?
Oh, yeah.
Number 18, keep, and number 19 is too much on this paper here?
Yes, that's
Okay.
what I'm saying.
I'd even go further that any trustee that creates anything with district letterhead must have full approval of prior approval of the board before distribution.
that goes too far, because then I have to ask you what I can
Yeah.
say, and that's not, that defeats the whole purpose of free speech, and being an independent elected official.
You're speaking on behalf of our board.
No. So, that's, if I get on Facebook tonight and say whatever, right,
You can do that.
that doesn't bind anybody. I'm speaking on
That's correct.
just me, right?
Right.
And so I really think that was just a one-off situation that really doesn't need to be addressed in a policy. And I think we've all moved past it. It's my opinion.
Mr. President, I think that this is entirely unnecessary. If you look through the guidelines that are proposed for number 18, nothing in there would have resolved what I was apparently attempting to do. I think clearly that this is a false outrage. People are saying that there were calls for censure because I used a graphic, and I totally actually agree with the graphics portion. I said that last meeting, but I think that the disagreements that came out about my resolution were more of the content of the resolution, because there's still a significant number of Americans who reject the idea that guns are at all a problem in our society. I think that's where the real disagreement is, and that's okay. We can disagree on those things.
Mike, was your on that letter? And this is where I think people get confused. On the proposed letter? Did it on the letter itself, not your actual Facebook post? On the letter, if you were to just print out the letter, or someone forwarded the letter, did that say proposed, or on your post it did?
And both of them. It's a proposed resolution. Now, the text that this did not reflect the district. Unfortunately, oversight, I didn't put that on the actual graphic. Hindsight being 2020, I would have done it if I had known that there would be censure calls from Kevin Cole and others in the community, but I didn't anticipate that.
Okay, I think we're going to move towards a resolution on this item. Well, when I say this item, I mean all that's in front of us tonight are the rules of conduct. Board members, I actually use the actual title. Okay, yeah, Yes, what's in front of us is the board members' rules of conduct. And, I mean, I gotta go back to the way that this first thing about the campaign contributions, that's, the way that's written, I just think that's clear and concise. And yes, it's, policy already covers it, but I just don't have an issue with that language. What I would like to do is,
We can vote on each one or what?
yeah, what I'm gonna do is ask for a motion to, no, we don't. You don't have to vote. You don't have to vote. So,
You don't have
What do
to.
you mean?
well, I mean, meaning what Sean is saying, we don't have to vote on each of these
Not a motion.
items.
Accept
So
these.
what I was gonna do is ask for a motion on the rules of conduct. That's probably too much. I was gonna ask for amendments on everything. I think that's just gonna be too much.
I'm confused.
You gotta do each one.
You gotta do each one, just make a motion if somebody wants it, and then vote on it, and if they don't want it, they vote against it. I mean, it's not each item.
I'm probably overthinking it, but I think what we need to do is have the rules in front of us as a motion, and then consider amendments to the motion. Granted, I'm probably overthinking it, but that's just the way I think it ought to go as far as being clear with Robert's Rules of Order.
Are we, Dr. Keller, are we required to adopt these rules every year?
No, the requirement is your own requirement within the board members' rules of conduct, where you say you're going to review them every year and address any amendments that you wish to see. So you're not required to amend it or required to even approve it, but you are required by your own internal rules to review it. And as Charles or others have done, they can suggest amendments to it.
So,
What was
I mean, if no one is willing to make any changes, then it's been reviewed and it's been accepted. So unless there's a motion to include any of these amendments, then
Well, Mr. President, I have a motion
Yes, sir.
that the rules of that the Board of Trustees amend the board operating procedures, including the rules of conduct and the standard rules, to include the rules of conduct related to campaign contributions to be included as item number 11, which is presented to each trustee on this document, including items number 1, 2, and 3.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Chair will second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, let's vote. All in favor? All opposed, same sign. Motion fails 2-5. All right. 2-4, excuse me, 2-4. Motion fails 2-4. Okay. Are there any further amendments? Any further motions?
Mr. President, I'll make a motion that members shall abide by the most current, that we should include a social media guideline as stated on your proclamation, or on the document.
Motion Carbone. Is there a second?
Second.
Second Barry. Any further discussion?
Yeah, so what you're saying is, in the number 2 document, the members shall abide by the most current version of the social media guidelines for the school board members posted by Texas Association of School Boards. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's
Thank you.
correct. All right, motion and second.
Just
Yes,
to
sir.
clarify, this is not the statement.
That's correct.
No, that's correct.
This is
just
not a
that one.
statement, no.
I'm going to make a statement on this. And again, social media guidelines as a guideline, because again, I'm a believer in free speech. And I think that all 7 of us up here are elected officials, and we're all responsible for what we say and what we post. We reap the benefits, and we suffer when we don't post things. So again, this is a guideline, but we are free to say whatever it is we want to say.
I understand what you're saying, but nothing in these guidelines restricts anybody's free speech.
Correct.
It's just acceptable use to help yourself stay out of trouble, right? That's it.
And technically, I mean, are we already under these guidelines by being a TASB district? No?
No.
They're just proposed guidelines. They're guidelines. They're not required.
These are not actually in policy, Michael. These are just.
Well, but some of them are,
guidelines.
right? I mean, avoid deliberating school district business without a quorum.
Yeah, that's an OMA.
Right? And that's
right.
OMA.
Right.
Reiterating it
Texas
for the
Education
thing.
Code 11.051. I mean, all of these are laws or cases.
Well,
Aside, I mean, the local policy BBF.
But it's bringing it all under the social media guidelines, which we're all new to, right?
This is the social
No,
media.
well, I mean,
We're all bringing it together, what you can and can't do. They're just guidelines to remind you.
okay. I mean,
kind of redundant, but it kind of falls into the social media, right?
Clearly, there are some
It's-
things that are not covered by policy here, and I could go into those if you'd like, but
I don't think that's necessary. I think, yeah. Okay, so there's a motion and second on the table. Is there any further discussion? I'll restate the motion to include the language, members shall abide by the most current version of social media guidelines for school board members published by the Texas Association of School Boards. All right, hearing no further discussion, let's vote. All in favor? All opposed? Six. I told you I didn't think it needed to be there. So yeah, the motion carries 6-1 with Gooden voting against the stuff.
5-1.
5-1. How many people are here? Rebecca messed me up. Okay, 5-1. All right. So, any further messages? Any further motions? All right. So, do we need to have an actual motion on? What we've done is that we've included this language into the rules of conduct. Generally speaking, the rules of conduct are voted on in the consent agenda. So there's an actual motion that says we accept these and we vote on it, right? So what we've done right now is just we've said we want to add something to it, and is a motion to accept it.
Amended it.
Yeah, we've amended them. So is there a motion in order to accept the rules of conduct as amended?
Is that necessary?
I don't know. I'm
I
thinking.
think it's clear enough.
Think it's clear enough? Okay. All righty. Good deal. Good deal.
Motion to adjourn.
Let me check and see where we are. No, we need one more item. Is the so we're moving on from that. All right, we're moving on to letter B. Item B underneath administrative reports. I think I actually mentioned this earlier that we were going to have a committee take a look at naming options, and Dr. Kelly polled the board, and we were kind of evenly split. But what I tried to do is make a nod to Jeff. One of your issues was there's no need, we don't need to pay for that, so that's going to be facilitated in-house. Yes, it's going to take a little bit extra time, but I think what we're going to get from the committee is going to be very helpful moving forward with naming buildings in the future. All right, with no further business to come before the board, we will stand adjourned at 8:16 p.m.